Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Crash Zoom. I'm Sammie Purcell, Associate Editor with Rough Draft Atlanta, and I'm here, as always, with indie filmmaker Aaron Strand. How you doing today, Aaron?
I'm doing all right today. I'm doing all right. I know you just got back from a big trip. The real question is, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. You know, I needed like a 30-minute power nap in the middle of the day today. My body felt like it was like 11 o'clock at night, but you know, I'm back. We're slowly readjusting. I think we're going to be fine. Yeah, I was in London, so working on a weird time difference right now, but we'll be back. We'll be back to our regular programming soon, hopefully.
But are we, though? We're actually not back to our regular programming.
We're not. We've got a bit of an announcement here at Crash Zoom. So I guess before we dive into that, if you've never listened to the show before, welcome. What Aaron and I do here is we take a look at what's going on in the industry from a big picture perspective. And we try to boil that down and figure out what that means for the independent artist. So normally we would dive into like 4 to 6 different topics, different news items that are going on this week, talk about all of those for like an hour to an hour and a half, somewhere in there. But we're trying a bit of a new format out here. So instead of releasing one weekly episode, moving forward, we're going to be releasing 2 episodes each week and diving a little bit deeper into one specific topic for about 20 or so minutes. So that's what we'll be doing moving forward, trying out a new kind of format. See what you guys think about that. Yeah,
we'll be crash zooming on a single subject. So instead of going back out, back in, back out, back in, we're just doing one crash zoom.
Look, less chaos, one big crash zoom. All right, so before we get into our topic for today, if you listen today and you like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also watch it. And you can also watch us on YouTube at Crash Zoom Podcast. Be sure to rate and review us as well. That really helps us out. So for today's topic, we're going to be digging deep on some AI stuff, particularly when it comes to international movie studios and how they're kind of really ramping up their use of AI, specifically CJ ENM. So this article comes from Variety that we're kind of going to be digging into, and this was also a topic in the Daily's newsletter recently, if you subscribe to them. So CJ ENM is a South Korean mass media and entertainment company. It produced a lot of movies that we know and love, a lot of Park Chan-wook movies, a lot of Bong Joon-ho movies, and they've recently unveiled their AI strategy alongside their first fully AI-generated series, Cat Biggie. But Cat Biggie is a 30-episode animation. It's created entirely using artificial intelligence by just 6 specialists in 5 months. So this is a process that would typically require, a ton of people and significantly more time. This is something that we've talked about a lot on this podcast. We've talked a lot about AI. We talked about Natasha Lyonne's sort of dive into the AI studio side of things a couple of weeks ago. But the South Korean media company seems to be really diving headfirst into this thing super fast. So we'll just start there. Aaron, what do you make of all this?
Well, before I get into some takes, I want to give a little bit of a broader perspective because the headlines that I've seen across the board is studio behind Parasite is launching AI initiative or whatever, but for American audiences, this has consistently been fed through the lens of Parasite. Now, I declared Parasite last week as the most overrated film of all time. I also find it to be a deeply misleading and incorrect lens through which to view this company. Okay. So I have a little history lesson, and for our shorter episode here, we're going to start with the wide angle lens of we're going to go all the way back to the 1950s, okay?
Wow.
In the 1950s, as Korea was emerging out of its civil war, the South Korean economy, with the support of the United States and entering into this, it wasn't a fully open society, but, trying to, they were certainly getting encouraged to be capitalist to the extreme. These families sort of coalesced around new innovations and wealth, and one of these families founded the company Samsung, which I'm sure you've all heard before, and you probably even have a Samsung device of some type of your own. Samsung was originally a trucking business, and it was founded by a man named B.C. Lee. And B.C. Lee was one of these like super innovative Korean guys where he just started building all these different companies. He started Samsung as a trucking business and moved it into electronics. He founded newspapers and media organizations, and he also created a commodity foods business called the Chail Jaedong Corp, known as CJ Group. Now, as the decades went on, there's several different of these sort of Korean like power families that create these massive sprawling conglomerates, and they're called chaebols in Korean. Now, they are often sort of revered as these huge economic drivers within Korea. They are also the source of a lot of corruption. The government and these chaebols are kind of constantly being criticized for their under-the-table deals, or potentially like harsh criticism when the government like decides to go after a family for political or personal reasons. So anyway, Mr. B.C. Lee here, the originator of Samsung, his son later joined the business, and his son had 2 children. He had a boy named Jay Lee and a daughter named Mikey Lee. Now, these 2 kids would later become the chairman and the vice chair of CJ Group in the mid-90s, okay? But these kids, they were originally born in the United States. They were educated in the United States. They loved Hollywood movies. And so in 1995, they inherited CJ Group, which was still a foods commodities business, and decided, we want to turn this into an entertainment company. They were one of the very first investors in DreamWorks Entertainment. They were actually the second largest investor in DreamWorks. So after Paul Allen, the Microsoft founder, was the biggest investor in DreamWorks, and but here Jay Lee and Mikey Lee were the second largest investors. They threw down $300 million, and they did so expressly telling Steven Spielberg, David Geffen, and Katzenberg that they wanted to like get involved with entertainment and they wanted to learn from the best. Since that point, they have become one of, if not the most powerful entertainment conglomerates in Korea and around the world. There is literally nothing in the world of entertainment that CJ, I always stumble over their name. That CJ ENM, because it stands for CJ Entertainment and Marketing. CJ ENM. There is nothing that CJ ENM doesn't touch. They produce movies. They own movie theaters. They run cable stations. They run print and radio. They were opened the very first multiplex in Korea back in the late 90s, because Korea had a repressive censorship kind of military government in the 80s, and so they had all this sort of repression of the media. So then by the late 90s, no one had ever built a multiplex in Korea before. So Jay and Mikey did, and now that their branded multiplexes have spread across Korea, China, Vietnam, all the way into Turkey. They have partnerships with some huge American companies. They are partners with Skydance. They have partnerships with Warner Brothers. And most importantly, they are majority shareholders in Fifth Season, which of course was Endeavor's content wing, William Morris Endeavor's content wing, that WME was forced to divest from when it was ruled that agencies couldn't control content studios, and that it was an antitrust issue. So as it became Fifth Season, CJ ENM came in and became a majority stakeholder. They are also majority stakeholders in HYBE, which is the K-pop company behind BTS and many of the other K-pop bands. And particularly Mikey Lee, the woman, the vice chairwoman, who's this Samsung heiress. She is the one who has really sort of had the vision to bring Korean culture across the globe. She's the one who invented KCON in Los Angeles, and now they do KCONs like all over the world, where they like bring the Korean boy bands, they bring the Korean shows. They were instrumental in, like you said, celebrating directors like Bong Joon-ho and Park Chan-wook and Lee Chang-dong, Kim Ki-duk, all of whom only were like able to make careers in the 90s again because they were emerging out of this political repression where filmmakers weren't allowed freedom of expression. So anyway, Mikey Lee also, she was a severe target of the Korean female president, Gyun-hye Park, who started a war with CJ ENM. Mikey Lee actually was a political refugee. She came to the United States to escape the repressive Park regime. And then when President Park was impeached in 2016, I can't remember the exact year, 2017, I think, and then was sentenced to prison. One of the charges against President Park was her extortion of Mikey Lee and CJ ENM. So this is like major Korean power players, and like they have their hands in everything. And that's why I think does such a disservice to say that's like the studio that brought you Parasite. Right. You know what I mean?
It's such a little, it's like, you know, it's the problem with headlines and like clickbait, right? They're like, you guys know this, like, here you go.
But I think that this is actually also very interesting and instructive, and I'll use this as to segue into my kind of my first take about this, which is that like I think there is something to be said that, okay, look, at the beginning of the year, right, in my 2025 predictions on this show, I said that we would have no American AI movies in 2025. We wouldn't have no sort of big AI like IP being introduced, but throughout the year, AI would subtly under the hood find its way into every step of the creative process, and it would kind of infiltrate the industry without a major headline. And I think overall that prediction has proven to be correct. However, what I didn't take into account was the possibility that American companies and media entities would find it very convenient to essentially like K-wash AI and like AI art into the mainstream discourse. You know, I think like Korean entertainment has exploded over the last 10 years. It's generally perceived, at least this is the way that like I talk to other people about it, as a very cutting edge, future forward, but still sort of very foreign to American audiences. Even if they really like it, it still feels like very different. And you know, maybe there is even a slight Orientalist kind of spin to it, but it feels very different entertainment than American entertainment. And so it's very convenient, I think, for Hollywood players to have a Korean company taking this big step forward to announce like, hey, we are producing AI animated shows. This is the future, because that already feeds into the narrative and perception of Korean entertainment as a whole. And I think that American companies enjoy hiding behind that headline.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you sort of said that, because I was, you know, when I was reading about this in the Daily's newsletter, it sort of ends its kind of little blurb, you know, they just do little blurbs on this stuff, but it ends its little blurb kind of with this quote: while Hollywood's navigating complex discussions about AI's role in the industry, international studios are hitting the gas. And it kind of made me think like, I don't know if yes, everyone's navigating complex discussions, but I do think it's a little bit of what you're saying. Like they're sort of happy to have, here's this stuff over here, and they're kind of on the cutting edge of it. So then it can be like, oh, well, we're just like following the car, right? Like we're just trying to play catch up. Exactly.
Right.
You know?
This is, as we've said, this has so frequently been framed in terms of a Manhattan project level sort of competition, or a space race that we must compete. So it's very convenient, because the other thing within the Daily's blurb was talking about China's using AI to like reboot Bruce Lee movies, or like these Hong Kong movies from the 70s. They're trying to like redo Hong Kong movies from the 70s with AI. I really don't understand like what that is even about. But yes, you can use this example to say like, well, we've got to catch up. But I think in this case, it's more that like Korea, whose entertainment is wildly popular in the United States, makes the use of AI more palatable to a general audience. It makes it feel like it's happening across the globe, but is also like we're reaping the benefits of it. And then also Korea, much like Japan, has a pretty less than stellar reputation in terms of how they treat their film industry workers and their animators. So they can also package it into this story of like, well, like these poor animators were being like forced to work 20-hour work weeks. And, really this is like, we're actually relieving human suffering, which again is it's easier to abstract that idea when it's happening across the globe rather than like when you're losing jobs at home.
Exactly. Like it's such a spin, like the efficiency thing like really jumps out, I think, in this Variety article in particular. Like, they made, I think it was 30-minute episodes with 6, keep saying specialists, and I'm sort of like, specialists in AI, I'm assuming, like, what does that mean? 6 specialists in 5 months. And normally like 5 minutes of 3D animation might take 3 to 4 months, right? Like these things are painstaking. And the way, this company is framing it in particular is like, oh, well, isn't that great? Like people aren't being sort of like pushed through the ringer or working their fingers to the bone, et cetera, et cetera. But having interviewed like a lot of animators over the course of my career, like stop motion, 3D, 2D, whatever it might be, animation is like such a loving art form. Like the people who do it, I think, enjoy, in a safe, nice environment, enjoy the sort of like painstaking work and like care that goes into it. And so this spin of like, oh, we're going to like help everyone, it's going to be more efficient, people won't be working themselves to the bone, I think is it works towards the company sort of, what's the word? You know what I'm saying.
Benefit. It works to their benefit.
Thank you so much. I'm still getting over my jet lag.
I mean, I think that, again, that's why I started with the parasiteness of the headline. Because Korean entertainment has also, I would argue, more meaningfully explored, or maybe just more hyperbolically explored, class tension than American films and television shows have. And so it provides them with this narrative cover as well. Because it's like, how could the production company behind Parasite, possibly do some evil wealth transfer shit? And especially when it's like, you don't realize that they're this like massively sprawling, huge conglomerate. CJ ENM still has a food goods wing. You know what I mean? Like that's how sprawling this conglomerate is and how money focused they are. So I think the parasiteness of it also sort of like does this reputation kind of management of the entire headline.
Yeah. Were you able to watch any of Cat Biggie? Were you able to find any of it online?
No, it hasn't. I don't think it's come out yet. Have you?
I was able to watch like there's some kind of weird grainy like Korean, not grainy. The Korean newscasts weren't grainy, and they had like kind of little like bits and pieces of it.
Oh, okay. I saw. Yeah,
and then I was able
that.
to see like there were some TikToks I think that had like sort of like maybe like little hidden kind of pictures of the actual like presentation itself where they presented this.
Oh, okay.
And I just, all this time we're saying like, oh, like Korea is perceived as sort of being on the cutting edge of everything movie making, and at least in like content and the way that it functions. This is pretty like meh, I'd say, as far as like what it looks like and sort of the animation itself. So I was just curious if you have been able to like watch any of it as well. But
yeah, I just saw the little news clips. And I mean, I think it's like smart to package it as a kids show. It didn't look like any better or worse than Cocomelon, so like that's sort of my like what I was the comparison point. What I did think was pretty interesting about the presentation is, so yes, they have this like AI animation engine that they are touting, but the thing that I found a little bit more troublesome and interesting, but in a slightly darker sense, was this AI script feature that they were touting, this proprietary AI script feature. Now, what they say is it, quote, this AI script feature, quote, scans consumer trends and market data to generate content ideas with high marketability potential. CJ ENM says its tool demonstrates superior understanding of literary language for deeper content marketability analysis with cross-lingual capabilities. And I was trying to think about what does this look like in real time? I mean, on the positive side, you could argue that a tool like this could, speed up the writing process to where you have motion images, motion picture entertainment that is speaking more to the modern moment. Because it is a problem that in the fast-paced media environment of this day and age, we can't have films that speak to things that are happening in real time, because the lag time between an event happening and a movie being made is so long. So I think that is a potential positive, but in reality, this is probably more of like a lowest common denominator race to the bottom, where this tool is going to be scraping through Reddit and cross-referencing what people are talking about on Reddit with like news and click data and all this stuff, and like spitting out these sort of real lowest common denominator stories. And I can't help but contrast that with I'm sure you listened to Jason Blum's recent interview on The Town, where he talked about he came on The Town to talk about the flop that was Megan 2, which was like everyone sort of like applauding Jason Blum for this, like for talking about his failures. But and look, I thought it was a lovely interview, and he really handled it very, very well. But I thought the favorite line from the whole thing was that he basically said, the worst but the most fun part of the theatrical motion picture business is that you really don't know what is going to work. And so it really makes me question how much this AI script feature is really going to put out anything that actually drives real interest versus appeals to the lowest common denominator in an unending race to the bottom.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely got to be the latter, just because, I mean, I think of like how this stuff works for like marketing, like my iPhone listening to like what I talk about and then ads popping up, like things like that. And I don't see it being, especially if money is involved and we're just looking, for the highest dollar amount, I don't see it trying to make anything, or the people using it, I should say, trying to make anything cutting edge about our current moment. Although that is a nice idea, that like maybe we could have something that speaks to the current moment, because it doesn't take 2 to 3 years, whatever it might be, to actually materialize. But I don't know if I see that happening.
It's also hard to imagine that whether real narrative depth could be found like within a sped up sort of writing process. In some ways, the long development and gestation period of particularly feature films, while on the one hand could be perceived as sort of something holding back, films that really speak to the modern moment, also create this inherent damming process that forces the human mind to comprehend things on a slightly deeper, more thoughtful level. At least one would hope. So I don't know if we're going to get more thoughtful analysis in a sort of like instant reaction, almost like imagine if we were getting like instant reaction, like TikTok style videos, but in like narrative form.
Oh my gosh.
Like what would that even look and feel like? And would it really be adding to depth to the conversation?
Well, no, because if you think about, I guess no, because if you think about it, people's instant reactions on Twitter to stuff are often misplaced, you might say, or like reactionary, et cetera, et cetera. And so if that is what we'd be getting with something like this, I don't know if it would necessarily be helpful to the current moment either.
I don't even know if people are wanting that. I don't even know if it would be like attractive entertainment, or do people genuinely prefer the sort of like hot take spin zone of people like us looking into cameras and talking about like news items, rather than like seeing like a dramatic rendering of like a take. I don't know.
Well, it's so funny because speaking of like what people want, you mentioned China is sort of trying to remake these like Bruce Lee films and all these other sort of martial arts classics and Hong Kong classics, and like remake them using AI. And I read this Times article from Richard Spencer, which it was interestingly framed it as like China's hoping to make these like popular with Gen Z by giving them more of like a modern aesthetic. They're calling it like the AI revival of 100 classics project. And this is something that we'll talk about more next episode, but like I am so uncertain that that is something that Gen Z even wants. Like I don't know if that's appealing to them at all in any sort of way, It's
hard to say. I mean, I don't really understand the Chinese market.
No,
so
that's true.
I don't want to pretend, because think that there's a little difference from what I do know just cursorily, and even just sort of reading about like Ne Zha 2, which is, the global number one box office film of 2025. But, from what I understand, Ne Zha 2 was essentially sort of mandated that people need to go see this movie, and for its sort of nationalist like pride and nationalist themes. So it's a little hard to say the line between what is it that young people want versus what is it that they're, expected to do from a socially acceptable standpoint. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll talk a little more about Gen Z next week, but do you have any last thoughts on this? I'm also blanking on the name of the company. CJ ENM. There we go. Any more thoughts on this?
No, I think they are being more upfront about what everybody else is already doing. Right. So in that sense, I don't think it's a particularly like groundbreaking story, but definitely worth following. And I think it's mostly a story about the interesting way in which American media is like digesting these headlines and interpreting them for a mass audience.
Absolutely. All right, let's end with something that we usually start with. So we normally do this at the beginning, but we thought it'd be a nice little kind of fade out at the end of our episode here. So Aaron, what have you been watching recently?
Yes, I have. I went and saw a fabulous movie from a friend and filmmaker who I have a lot of respect for here in Atlanta, a guy named Alec Bonk. His movie Blind Cop 2, which he played at the Plaza and is also taking on a roadshow after its festival run. I went and saw this movie. It is a sort of an ode, an homage to classic 80s like cop shoot 'em up movies. I thought it had such a wonderful satirical edge to it. I thought it was really well written. My favorite thing about it is that it played fun with the like 80s genre of like cop movies, but it never made fun of the characters, and it never talked down to the characters. And the characters also like never talked down to the audience. The movie had moments of great comedy, but it was always justified and it was a byproduct of characters actually pursuing things in the story. And this is a mistake that I see so many filmmakers make across the board, where they poke fun at their characters and at their material rather than letting the characters create comedic moments out of genuinely pursuing objectives. And in speaking to Alec afterwards, he talked about like just how important that was to him. And I just thought that was such an accomplishment and they just did such an incredible job. The story was really engaging. And I just loved the movie. I thought it was so fun and so well done. And so if you get a chance to see their roadshow as they continue up the East Coast, and I think they'll go up to the West Coast eventually, just check them out. Follow them. Blind Cop 2. Really joyful night out at the cinema, and I was really glad that I got to see it.
Nice. That sounds lovely. It's always good to have a nice time out supporting people,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Not even supporting, just enjoying a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been on a plane, as we mentioned, and what I usually do on planes is, so what I usually do is like watch things that I know for my job I should watch, and that I just like either didn't want to when it came out or didn't get around to. And this was definitely in the former category. So I watched It Ends With Us on the way to London.
Nice.
Which is the Justin Baldoni directed, Blake Lively starring film. I don't want to get into all the other stuff.
I think I've heard about it. Yeah, there was some controversy around.
We don't need to talk about all that right now. We'll just talk about the movie. But so this movie is really bad. And I knew it was going to be bad, but I wasn't sure just how bad something could be. It's just, movies about abuse and cycles of abuse are really difficult, and this movie just like completely misses the mark. It's absolutely tremendously, kind of impressively awful. So I'll give it that. At least I'm impressed that something could be this bad. So
Shub watched it on a plane ride a few months ago, and I experienced it over her shoulder.
Cameron did the same thing.
Yes, and look, like, I'm trying to be better about really hating on things that I haven't experienced firsthand.
Right.
But I could just tell from the silent rendering of the scenes of just how bad this thing was.
Right. I had subtitles on, and every once in a while, we're like shoved into these seats. I'd feel like a shoulder moving because Cameron was laughing and something had been said. Yeah. So it's that kind of movie. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not very good. So
it's amazing.
A little bit of a downer to end on. But
amazing. Well, it's a wonderful. It's the drama behind the drama behind the drama, which is that it's incredible how the most horrendous mountains of shit can spin out like all this like crazy controversy, and it's just like, for what? What did y'all do? How did y'all get in this mess together for this horrible, horrible movie?
Right. And this is where I'm trying to be like a little kinder too, because I know this is a very popular book and I don't want to like hurt anyone's feelings who really likes the book or it helped them through something difficult, et cetera, but it is not for me. And I just don't think it's very good.
That's fair.
Sorry to Colleen Hoover.
Hey, you call it like you see it. And I think that's probably as good a note to end on as any. Well,
I think so too.
If this episode was not for you, keep that to yourself. But if this episode was for you, we would love to hear from you. Please like, subscribe, rate, and review. Hit us with the 5 stars. Let us know how you like the shorter new format. We still managed to like crack out like a half an hour on this topic.
I know.
So we're doing the best we can. You can follow us, Crash Zoom Podcast, at Crash Zoom Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. You can also email us, crashzoompod@gmail.com. That is crashzoompod@gmail.com. Until later this week, Sammie, I will talk to you.
Talk to you soon.